I have over 20 years experience of teaching English, and during this time I've taught English to literally thousands of students. I've seen students progress from A1 to C2. I've also, despite my best efforts, seen many students fail, drop out and give up and not reach fluency. Over time you get to recognise the strategies that work and those that don't. I have the data, lots of data, and furthermore, I've successfully learned foreign languages myself. So you can apply these techniques to learning any language. And if you're still skeptical, then listen to my guest. He's helped more students to successfully pass Cambridge First, Advanced and Proficiency exams than you've had hot dinners. It's Ben from To The Point English.
Hello, Gideon. Thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Okay, but the small number of people that don't know who you are, perhaps you could briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Ben Gill. I'm an English teacher from England originally, but I'm living in Spain. And I have a YouTube channel called To The Point English with Ben, where I, much like Gideon, I make sort of general English learning videos, but I also specialise in preparation videos for the Cambridge English exams. The B2 First, also known as the FCE, the C1 Advanced, which is the CAE, and the C2 Proficiency, which is known as the CPE.
I have more than 20 years experience, and you too, you have taught thousands of students.
Yeah, thousands. Oh, yeah, over 20 years experience, and yeah, without a doubt, thousands of students.
Now, the title of this video is something like How to Learn English. Now, obviously, if you're watching this video, you already know some English, so perhaps a more precise thing would be how to become fluent, become advanced, and I think that it's great that we're discussing this together. What I often come across are, well, I don't want to criticize anyone, but you see these, hyper polyglots on YouTube saying, well, I did it like this and you can too. Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but that might not apply to you. And we have the data. You're talking about data. You used to work in IT, but we have the data. We know from experience what works and what doesn't work. We have all the. It's not a theory. It's the facts. We know it. So you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's nothing better than experience. I think it's a real life experience of working with students, all different ages, all different levels, with all different needs, and noticing and observing what they did well, and the reason that they improved. Some students improve quite quickly. They get to an advanced level of English quite quickly. Others, it takes longer. Some people, as you said, fail because they don't do it right. They don't follow the tips that we're going to share today, or they're just the wrong attitude. So yeah, we've observed it. We've seen it with our own eyes. A combination of our years' experience must be over 40 years experience in total.
Okay, I'll put that on the thumbnail, 40 years experience. I would say that you can usually tell if someone is going to successfully become fluent after speaking to them for about 20 minutes. You just get this feeling that they've got the right approach. Would you go along with that?
Yeah. 100%.
You know who's going to drop out.
It's the attitude. It's all about attitude, I think, and mindset, if you want a more modern word for that, the mindset that they have. Also, I like to talk about the relationship with English. If you have a positive relationship with English, and as you said, you can tell quite early when you have maybe the first class with a student, if they have the right attitude, the right mindset, or whether they just see English sort of as something they have to learn and they have to sort of struggle to keep improving, and they have to do this, they have to learn the grammar, they have to expand their vocabulary, rather than seeing it as something positive and having a healthy relationship with English.
And we're each going to give a few tips. Well, I haven't seen your tips and you haven't seen mine. And it'd be interesting to see if they coincide. Also, for the viewers out there, if you've got a list of what you think is important, see if it's the same as ours. That would be interesting. But just one other point I wanted to mention about, not just about learning English, but about learning language, is that most people fail. Most people who start learning a language don't become fluent, whether it be English or French or Chinese. Most people don't reach fluency. So it's actually a minority that do get there. So it's very important that you follow the right path, the right strategies. You agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I feel that in these videos we're kind of preaching to the choir in that the people that choose to watch these videos perhaps have a good attitude, a good relationship. So they have to remind themselves that they're doing really well. They're doing, keep going. You're
Yeah,
doing the right thing. As Gideon
but
said, a lot of people don't.
maybe there are a few things they hadn't thought of.
I'm sure they will. Yeah.
I've got some, shall we say, unusual ones too in
hmm
my list. So we'll go through them. Would you
hmm
like to start?
Perhaps this one isn't the least obvious one, but it's probably one of the most important, and it's simply pay attention. Pay attention and notice. Pay attention to the mistakes you make, or even things you do well. If you use a really nice grammar construction, pay attention to that. But I think what I really notice is students who really do well, who really improve quickly, they're proactively paying attention to everything. Really, it's quite easy to be passive in English and just sort of, yes, surround yourself with English and watch lots of series and films in English, but not actually get much from it, not actually learn the vocabulary that you could. Or, as I said, it's about noticing grammatical structures while you're hopefully enjoying what you're reading or watching at the same time. But remind yourself to pay attention.
Okay, pay attention. I totally agree with that. It's also connected with like being interested, because you're going to pay attention when you have a passion for something.
It's not about sort of deep, intense concentration, but being curious. When you read a book, for example, and you read a sentence, you can understand it. I'm sure you can read maybe a whole paragraph, you understand everything. You could just continue reading and forget about it, but you could actually think about the grammar that was in that paragraph or in that sentence, and really just make an extra effort and pay attention, and yeah, be curious about why they've used that grammatical structure or that particular fixed expression or that particular preposition or something like that.
I think that's a very good point. And I notice when people read books in a foreign language, you compare different strategies. If I try and read something and I don't understand a word, it drives me crazy. I'm not saying my strategy is the best, by the way, but I'm saying why, or there's a grammatical structure which I don't know. I think I have to know this. And I look up the grammar. It ends up taking me months to read one book. But other people it says, well, it doesn't matter. It's input, you'll get the gist, you'll get it eventually. So those are two different strategies, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah, I think
Both are paying attention, as long as you get through the book.
Yeah, I think, I don't want the big danger here is that people think, oh, but I just want to enjoy the book. I don't want to be focusing and being, concentrate. That's fine too. You're getting a lot of benefit from that. Just read a book, enjoy it. You're going to pick up the vocabulary more passively. But as you know, Gideon, I focus a lot on exam preparation. And I've noticed that students who are preparing for an exam, during their preparation, their English level really does jump. There's a big improvement because suddenly they're paying more attention. Because they have this objective of this goal of passing an exam. They're a little bit more motivated and focused and paying more attention. Yeah.
That's a good point. I might return to it in one of my points later, one of my strategies. Maybe I'll tell you my first one.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, see what you think. I thought I was going back to the beginning here, and my first point is objectives. Now, when you're learning a language, not everyone has the same objective. So this is really going back to the beginning. Maybe if you're not learning English, you're learning another language. You need to know what you really want to do with the language. Do you want to have conversations? Is your objective just to have a chat at a intermediate level? Do you want to just read? Is there some literature that you want to read in the language you're studying? In that case, you're going to use a different strategy. I recently went to Korea, actually. I was in Korea and I thought, there's no way that I'm going to learn Korean. I've started enough languages in my life, and the ones I've started, I want to finish. But it would be great just to be able to, have small conversations in cafes and order things. So my strategy would be different. So everyone has to know what they want to do with the language, and that'll help further along the line.
Yeah, I completely see what you mean. It's a very good point. If you can remind yourself of your objective, of why you're doing it.
Yeah, if you're going to spend more time reading and writing, then you should spend more time reading and writing. So
Yeah.
it seems obvious, but that's
Yeah.
not what people do. For some people, it's about the pronunciation. When I'm learning a foreign language, I want to have acceptable pronunciation, and that's fine for me. But for other people, it reaches up to a point of obsession that every phoneme has to be very precise, and they'll spend many, many hours learning that. So you
Yeah,
find
depends.
terms.
Everybody is different. Everybody has slightly different objectives. So yeah, do what's right for you once you identify your objective. Good point.
Okay, carry
You want
on.
my
Your
next
turn.
one? Okay. Okay, I'm going to give a slightly less obvious one, maybe a little bit an alternative one, because I've been thinking about this a lot recently. We all know that our attention span in general is getting smaller and smaller. I think every generation has a shorter attention span, but I also notice it in myself that I think my attention span is a lot shorter today than it was 20 years ago. I think
Yeah,
because there are so many distractions and we're
we
so
check
bombarded
our
with
phones every
information.
3 minutes.
Exactly, yeah. I think for me, it's every 3 seconds, and you get anxious when you can't find your phone. It's
Yeah.
nomophobia, I think it used to be called. So yeah, then our attention spans. So I think we can just complain and say, "Oh God, aren't we terrible? Our attention spans are so short." But I think we have to adapt our learning to that a little too. So I think you can try bite-sized learning. So I don't know if I invented that term, but I'm going to claim I invented it. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but bite-sized learning. So rather than read a book, that's quite intimidating. It's quite overwhelming to read a whole book in English or any second language. So just read articles, internet articles, BBC or any particular website you like. Watch short videos or watch short episodes of a series or just 5 minutes of a series. Just do something because it has to be realistic and it has to fit into your life and it has to be something you're really going to do, not just, if you say, I'm going to read Crime and Punishment this year, maybe you will, maybe you're the type of person that can do that. But if not, then be more realistic and just say, I'm going to read one article a day or 3 articles a week, or I'm going to watch one episode, or I'm going to even write one paragraph or a couple of sentences. Just make it bite-sized, but regular, consistent, rather than these big challenges. That's my slightly less obvious tip, but bite-sized learning. What do you think about that, Gideon?
Yeah, I'm trying desperately hard to say I disagree, but I don't disagree. But
Ah,
instead of just saying, yeah, I totally agree with you, I'll just give you an example from my own personal experience. When I moved, my first teaching job was in Spain, and I didn't speak any Spanish when I went there, and I used to buy El País every day at the time, buy newspapers, and so what am I going to do here? I don't understand anything. So I look at the headlines, then I would just read the weather forecast. So for the first few weeks, I was just reading the weather, looking at So in the beginning, I could have deep discussion with a Spaniard about the meteorological conditions of moving from the south, but nothing else.
you couldn't say, where do you buy your bread? That was impossible.
Yeah,
But you could
exactly,
talk about the cold front coming from
I could ask for a glass of water, but I could talk about precipitation and weather systems. But anyway, that was it. I mean, we're in the internet age. The good thing about that approach is even if you're waiting for the bus, the metro, you got 5 minutes, and you've got your
Yeah.
phone nowadays. It helps. You can just do something, read a small article,
Yeah.
learn some vocabulary, learn something. So
And the other
it's very
advantage is,
important. Yeah.
yeah, I think you can also expose yourself to a wider range of vocabulary or styles because if you read one book, it could take you a couple of months if you read or more. If it's a book, reading in a second language takes you longer in general. But if you read, let's say, 30 articles in that time or more, you're probably going to read articles on lots of different topics. So you're going to be exposed to lots of different types of vocabulary, and that's going to be really useful. I'm not definitely not saying you shouldn't read books because books are great. But if you find it a little bit overwhelming and intimidating, then lots of articles, and instead of writing an essay, write a couple of sentences because that's more doable. It's more feasible.
I noticed that some of your videos are quite short, like they're like 3, 4, 5 minutes long. And what I tend to talk incessantly over a long period of time. But if you've just got a few minutes, so watch one of. Did I have I already recommended your channel? If you're not subscribed to Ben's channel, then what have you been doing with your life so far? That's all I want to say. But but you give like really small tips, or like one piece of vocabulary, or one sentence, or thing. So of course, not only Ben's channel, but that's a very, very good starting point. And of course, there's BBC Learning English, which is 6 minutes. Is that right? They have 6 minutes English.
6-minute English, I think it's called. Yeah, different people like different things. When I make those short videos, like maybe 2 or 3 minutes to teach one chunk of vocabulary, some people say, "Oh, I love this format." Some people say, "I prefer the longer format." So but if that's the beauty of and the benefit you'll get from this video and all of Gideon's longer form videos it's so great that it's definitely worth spending the time and energy. There you go. There's a return compliment for you.
I'll go on to mine. And it's like connection with what you said. My next point. I'm kind of working mine sort of from the beginning, moving forward in terms of.
You have a plan.
I have a it's a plan. So let me ask you a question, Ben. See if you can work out my thing. If in your house, in your pantry, you've got lots of cakes and crisps and Oreo cookies and healthy stuff like that and frozen pizzas, what are you going to eat?
You've seen my pantry, obviously. I don't know when you were in my house.
Yeah.
What am I going to eat? Of those options that you just
probably
said,
Oreo cookies and
stuff, if they were just the most unhealthy and sort of sweet.
Whereas if you open your fridge and you find broccoli, carrots, other healthy stuff that I can't think of at the moment.
Spinach.
Spinach. My strategy is first build the environment. So one reason that people move to an English-speaking country is because the environment is in English. You don't automatically. You're not just because you're in an English-speaking country, you're going to learn English. No, it's because the environment's in English. Everything you do, you buy your bread, your Oreo cookies, your broccoli in English. Okay, and you've got to think about that and to do everything you can to encourage you to learn English. If you have books on your shelf that are in English, you're more likely to pick one up. If you have one on your bedside table, you're more likely to pick it up and read it than if you don't have one, okay? And think to yourself, what's happening in this room, in this house, that is discouraging me from learning English, okay? So
I was thinking of the settings on your phone, or join even like Facebook groups, or follow English-speaking accounts, or YouTube channels. They don't have to be English teachers, but
exactly.
I guess just English channels for maybe it's about football or gardening or photography, but in English.
Exactly. And if you sign up to, I know, groups, these groups for like Meetup and other websites which are in English, the very fact that you're signed up to them means you're more likely to go. If you join the gym, you're more likely to go to the gym if you don't join. Does that make any sense?
I think so.
So register for podcasts. You're more likely to listen to them if you register. So build the environment around you that's in English or the language that you're learning, and that will help you. That'll nudge you every day towards doing something in English.
Yeah, but I agree. And I think it's kind of related to what we were saying right at the beginning about attitude. If you have a healthy relationship with English, you're going to want to surround yourself and have an environment where you're able, or it's possible to connect with English regularly. I think some people, they feel like, I'm going to learn English, but they have this kind of negative attitude towards it. So maybe they have one class a week, and for them that's enough. If you can immerse yourself in English, or surround yourself with English in the meantime, then you're going to get a lot more benefit from it. And
exactly. Maybe you should set your phone or your computer to wake you up in the morning listening to one of Ben's videos. I'm only half kidding, but seriously though, that sort of strategy, if you just change that and make little changes in your life, so that that's why it's kind of a myth when people say that the only way to learn a language is to move to the country. And I know for a fact that's bullshit, because I'm sure you do too, because I've met so many people who've reached really high level, I've reached C2 level, and have never been to an English-speaking country. That's definitely false. But what these people do is they build an environment around themselves. They're always using English.
Exactly, it's
Might
that
have to use it at
attitude.
work or whatever, but yeah.
And I've seen the opposite happen. I know, for example, English people who come to live in Spain and they can't really speak Spanish. They don't really
Yeah.
get, they can maybe say the basics, but they don't have the right attitude because they've basically
Exactly.
done the opposite. They've built an environment in English. So they maybe get cable TV where all the channels are in English. They buy English newspapers or watch English websites. So they're not learning Spanish because they're not in that Spanish environment, even though they're living literally in Spain. So
Yeah.
it can happen both ways. And I
I've
agree
met people like
completely.
that. They've been there 20 years and
Mm.
they just know the basics.
It's all about attitude and yeah, you can make it
Yeah.
happen. I think it's a bit of an excuse for some people to say, well, I'll never learn English to a high level because I haven't had the opportunity to live in England or Ireland or the United States. It's a bit of an excuse because you just need to be more proactive. Again, that word proactive, but
Exactly. It comes
it's
back
possible.
to attitude that you were talking about earlier as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And
You don't
having a
see
positive relationship.
that as a negative. Oh, I can't learn. I don't live in an English-speaking country. I can't learn English properly. It's not going to happen.
Exactly.
No, that
Exactly. It's
attitude.
this defeatist attitude from the first
Yeah.
moment. I've had that in my classes. I've had students in the first class, they say, nice to meet you. And they say, I can't learn English. I'm sorry. I've come to the classes, but I'm just not the type of person that can learn English. And that's just the defeatist attitude from the first moment. And they can. Anybody and everybody can learn English. Maybe some people find it more difficult than others, but the first step is a positive attitude.
Sometimes, I have to interview new students, and sometimes I've heard this so often. The first thing they say to me is, "I have a problem with my English."
Yeah.
I said, "Why do you have a problem if you're on the road to your destination? Why you're driving between London and Manchester and you're only at Milton Keynes? I have a problem with my driving." No, you're just on that path. But so many people say that. I guess you've heard that too.
Yeah. I think it's just this feeling
It's
that
not a
they're
problem.
not really understanding the process and just thinking it's
Yeah.
like it's magic, I'm just gonna.
Exactly, it's about the process. It's about focusing on just improving at each step, not just
Exactly.
thinking about I'm not at the destination, therefore I have a problem.
Because again, we've said this before, and it's quite a cliche, but there is no destination. You're not going to
Yeah,
suddenly
it's true.
arrive and say, "That's it. My English is exactly the level I wanted it, and I don't need anything more." That moment will never come because you'll always
No,
feel
even
you
for a
can.
native speaker, even a native
Exactly. Yeah.
speaker, it
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
You can always learn more.
The destination, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, over to you. Next tip.
Okay, my next one, it's viewers are not
Sounds-
going to like it. It's going to sound very basic, but I think people underestimate it. And it's simply to write. Because we talk about input and surrounding yourself in English and putting yourself in an environment. That's all correct. That's true. But for me, I think we in general, or people underestimate the value of writing something. It's a productive skill. Obviously the productive skills are writing and speaking. We don't always have opportunities to speak in English. You should be finding opportunities. That's another tip, of course, to speak. But also the problem with speaking is that it's happening in real time, so you don't have time to really think about what you're saying or how you're constructing your sentences. You're just kind of just doing enough to make sure that the person you're speaking to is understanding you. But when you're writing, you can stop and think about how to, think about the options. What verb tense could I use here? Could I use the conditional? What adjective should I use? Maybe I know a better synonym. How can I express this idea? Because often there are numerous ways to express the same idea in a sentence with relative clauses or cleft sentences. You don't need to worry about the names or the definitions of the grammar, but find an opportunity to write something. It could just be a couple of sentences or a paragraph about your thoughts, like in some kind of like a diary of some kind in English. You could write a short story. Maybe you like writing short stories, an article or just comments on YouTube videos. Just write little comments. Take the opportunity. You can write something that nobody is ever going to see because a lot of people, they hesitate or they don't want to write because they're embarrassed about spelling mistakes. But just write something, and I think it's such a valuable skill or an activity that very few people do, I know, and I think it's a pity because I think there's a lot of advantages to it and you get a lot of benefit, not just for writing, but you know, the vocabulary and grammar really gets interiorized, and you can remember it better if you use it in productive way. What do you think, Gideon?
Yeah,
Disagree with me?
I absolutely totally agree with you. And I mention this to my students often, and it's an underrated skill. We say, well, I don't need to write very much. I just want to talk. But no, if you take the time to write, it'll improve your spoken fluency, your conversation, your authority when speaking. So it improves your written English, of course, as you'd expect. It improves your grammar. It helps you to take time to reflect about what you're writing. It's so important.
You probably won't need to write that much in real life. Maybe you need to write an email or a report for work or some text messages in English, but it's, as you said, Gideon, it helps other skills too, especially your speaking, I think.
The only thing I'll add is that when you are writing, try to step out a bit of your comfort zone. So don't write just what you know already. Write a little bit about what you don't know. Use difficult grammar constructions. Use more complicated vocabulary, and just nudge it up a bit, and that'll help.
Yeah, experiment, play with it a bit.
Yeah.
As I said, if you're
You
not,
won't get it right all the time. You know, people
No.
make mistakes writing. That's the most difficult thing to get really. But that's fine. It's fine to make mistakes.
yeah. If you're not preparing for an exam, if you're just doing it for yourself, experiment. Yeah, try a mixed conditional here or whatever. And when you're writing, I mean, I do say this to my students for exam preparation. Maybe you write an adjective important and just think, do I know another synonym, a better synonym, a more impressive, not even more impressive, but a bit more descriptive adjective than just important, for example. So you could say paramount, salient, something like that. I like that idea, Gideon, of playing with it a little bit and experimenting. It can be fun, and if nobody sees it, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes, even if people see it, but you know, don't feel embarrassed.
I know I teach in France, so when French people write, when they speak and write in English, the default is to use French words that we use in English.
Right.
So I'm encouraging them, they're writing, you take a moment and think, maybe there are alternatives. So for example, a French person always write probability. Well, you know, why not likelihood, which is probably many situations better if you're not talking about numbers and technical things. Likelihood. So by writing, you get the time to reflect on the words.
Exactly, yeah.
Check the etymology, get some other sources.
Yeah, just analyze what you're writing while you're writing it, and it's such a valuable activity, I think. So do it. Write in the comments to this video, write a little short story.
Yeah, the good essays.
And Gideon will read them all and reply to them all and correct them.
Okay, so my next point is, I think it's very important. Forget everything we've just said. Ben and myself, forget everything we've said. In the end of the day, everybody is different. And this is so important. No, of course I'm kidding. We're giving you good strategies. But at the end of the day, it's you who finds the best strategy, the thing that works for you. That's why when you see these, again, these videos of hyper polyglots, I learned 23 languages in 6 months, and you can do it too. It's easy. Just do these steps. Well, yeah, okay, well, it works for this person, but maybe it's not going to work for you. Everyone is different. Find the thing that works best for you. For example, I'll just give you for an extreme example. Somebody who has ADHD is going to learn English in a different way as somebody who doesn't. So a person with ADHD is not going to be able to sit down and spend 2 hours going through exercises and doing the thing. But so yeah, there are lots of strategies out there. Find what's best for you. That's all I say. And whatever makes you happy. Don't do the things that you hate so much. Find your mojo. That's my tip.
Find your mojo. I like that.
Okay.
Right.
You agree with that?
No, not at all. I completely disagree. No, I do agree. Yes, of course. No, of course. I completely agree that everybody is different. Every individual is different. Everybody's brain learns in a different way. We can give general tips like the attitude and environment and writing, all those things, but how you approach it and how you
Yeah.
actually absorb the information depends on the type of brain you have.
I was only half joking, but it's true. Whatever we're saying here, those points may not apply to you. Okay, fair enough. You don't want to learn English for 6 minutes. You prefer to read a book in its entirety, or the opposite. You prefer to do things differently. That's okay. That's perfectly. Don't feel that you're doing something wrong. Just adapt the learning so that you enjoy it, so that it suits you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I think people feel this pressure. I'm doing it wrong. That's why I hate those videos that say sort of
This is what you
stop.
have to do.
Yeah, or stop saying please, or native speakers never say thank you. And people see those videos and think, well, I've been saying thank you and please, or
Yeah.
stop saying how are you.
Yes.
Don't say how are you. We never say, but we do say these things. So people then
Yeah.
think, I've been doing it wrong. This is all I've been doing. No, it's not wrong. It's all right. However you want to do it. Even making mistakes is okay because it's part of learning. But yeah, don't, as Gideon's suggesting, don't put too much pressure on yourself, or don't let other people put pressure on you to learn in any particular way. It doesn't mean if you, yeah, Gideon used the example of the bite-sized learning. If you don't like doing that, fantastic, better for you. But generally, people's attention span is getting shorter and shorter, so it's good for a lot of people, but not everyone, and maybe not you. And just relax. It's all good.
About how are you? Because it reminds I had a class and I met a student, and as I walked in, she said, "How are you?" And then she apologised. "Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Why are you sorry?" I said, sorry. I shouldn't say that because I saw a video that says you should never say how are you because native speakers don't say it. So I'm really sorry.
It makes me so angry.
So
We
no,
do
it's
say
okay.
it.
I say how are you. It's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I say it.
What you're supposed to say instead? What are you supposed to say instead?
I don't know. They have all the like, how's things.
Is it, I don't know.
What's up? What's up? Yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah,
how
well,
are
I
you?
like how are you.
Perfectly
I
fine.
just say because you're showing an interest in the other person, and
Yeah.
it encourages a response, and yeah, it's
Yeah,
nice.
you can say how do you do if you like. That's a little bit more formal and old-fashioned, but
Maybe you're from a different generation than I
but you can. I mean,
But yeah, fair enough.
it's fine. I mean, if they want to speak more formally in English, that's fine
No,
too.
that's
I mean,
okay, sure.
nobody's
Someone did
nobody's
say
going to
how
laugh.
do you do to me in English a few months ago, and I was kind of surprised
Yeah,
because you usually say how do you when you met somebody for the first time. You said, "Oh, how do you do?" And I was pleasantly surprised. Oh, you don't hear that very
Yeah.
much, but it was just
Yeah.
It wasn't affected. She was just speaking that way.
yeah.
And she was quite young. She wasn't 107 years old. No, she was. Over to you.
Your last tip was good, Gideon. There's just one thing. It's not that I disagree with it. I think
Oh yeah.
because it's when you're saying do things that you enjoy. I think you said do things that interest you. That's true. I think you have to do that because learning English, or your relationship with English, has to be sustainable over a long time. But one of my tips is that also occasionally read articles on something that perhaps, or watch a documentary or a YouTube video on a topic that perhaps you wouldn't usually choose to watch or listen to or read. Imagine if you like, let's say, gardening. That's your hobby and you watch lots of YouTube videos and you read books about gardening, or maybe the weather. Like with Gideon's example in Madrid, he became an expert on meteorology because he read the weather every day. That's fine, you're going to expand that vocabulary, but if you need to talk about, or they're in a conversation where everybody's talking about photography and you don't have any vocabulary, you don't have to become an expert on every topic in the world. That's impossible. But just to be able to speak about different topics on a sort of relatively superficial level, it's good occasionally just to put yourself in a situation where you're exposed to different types of vocabulary occasionally, because as I said, you don't want to be doing that all the time because it's probably not going to be sustainable. You're going to get bored. But I think preparing for an exam, still think it's a good idea because you want to learn a wide range of grammar, not just a narrow range. Can you say narrow range, or it can only be wide range? You can say narrow range, right?
No, ranges could be narrow or wide.
Yeah, I think so. It just sounded strange when I said it.
Yeah, I do agree. I'm just trying to sort of come back add something. I'll give an anecdote. It's not about learning a foreign language, but maybe it applies here. When I was in Tokyo, time back, in order to kill time, I found myself in front of the sumo museum, and I thought, well, I'm not really interested in sport that much. But I went in and I started reading all the things. It was fascinating. Because it's so interesting. I never imagined all the history. So don't have this sort of narrow approach. I only want to learn about what I like. No, you don't
Hmm.
know until you've tried it sometimes. So, yeah,
Yeah,
experiment with different subjects, and yeah, definitely
exactly. And
improve your vocabulary in different areas.
I'm just thinking, going back to what you said about environment too, it's linked. As you know, I lived in Madrid for 18 years, so I learnt my Spanish living in a city, in the capital city. But then 2.5 years ago, we moved to Asturias, a very rural area. And suddenly I realized my vocabulary is not that great. I don't have such a wide range of vocabulary because suddenly we're
You don't know
talking
the name of
about
the trees and the wild animals and the
exactly, or
insects.
cowbells, for example. I thought I knew, well, I thought I could work out how to say cowbell. I thought it would just be literally translating cow and bell, but they have a very specific word here for cowbell. Drinking trough. When I walk my dog, we walk up to a drinking trough for cows, and I didn't know how to say that to people. We always walk up to the drinking trough. So I've learned that. So what I'm saying here is it depends on what type of vocabulary you're going to need too. And you don't know. Maybe you'll get a new job in the future where you're suddenly going to need all this different type of vocabulary. Yeah, keep your vocabulary range as wide as possible because you don't
I
know what
agree.
you'll need it for in the future.
I live in France, I live in Paris, and yeah, my French is okay, but one area where I have real expertise is plumbing, and that's
Yes.
because I live in an old apartment and there's always a
Yeah.
plumbing problem, and every few months the plumber has to come in and we have to talk about things. So I know all the words about plumbing. So
Yeah, if you had a new house without any problems, it would be you wouldn't have
exactly,
learnt so much.
exactly, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I have an old banger of a car, and I have to take it for an MOT every year. People who have new cars don't have the luxury of that experience of going to and speaking to the mechanics and going through the answering the questions and following the instructions. It's quite
Well,
a stressful experience, but it's great for my Spanish.
I don't have a car, and I wouldn't, even in English. I think there are lots of
Yeah.
bells and whistles in your average motor car that I have no idea what they do. My next one is it's kind of obvious, but it needs to be said. Do the hours. Okay, so whatever strategies we're coming up with, again, these are fantastic strategies that Ben and I are giving here, but anyone who sits down and studies a language for 1,000 hours is going to reach a better level than someone who studies it for 10 hours. Okay, that's just a fact. Okay, this is how maths work. That's why it's so important to enjoy what you're doing. So you enjoy it because it's to learn a language to a good level of fluency is going to take a lot of time. It's not 1 hour a week, it's a lot of hours. It takes a lot of your spare time. It occupies so much of your life, and you've got to put in the hours. So if you do, that will get you far. Whatever strategies, whatever saving tips we can give you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's do the work. Basically, there are no shortcuts. Again, these videos that suggest you can learn English in 2 months or whatever, you can. I
Without
mean,
effort.
yeah, without effort, you can learn something. I mean, what does it mean to learn a language anyway? Is it to learn a few words to
Yeah,
be able
exactly.
to order a coffee in a bar? Or is it to be able to get
Exactly.
to fluency, a level of fluency? But you have to do the work, yeah. There are no real shortcuts or hacks or whatever you want to call them. At the end of the day, it's spending time, yeah, with
And the truth is, it takes years.
to get to
Uh,
any half decent level, yeah, sort of intermediate or above. Yeah.
yeah, you're not going to learn any language in 3 months. You can have
No.
the basics maybe. You can have a little conversation, talk about the weather in
Yeah.
Madrid possibly. But
It's put the work in, yeah. Put the work and the
so
hours in, and it will
I
come.
think so. If you can manage to do what is it? There's this 10,000 hour rule that you need 10,000
Mm.
hours to achieve excellence in any field. And if you heard of
Hmm.
that one,
Yeah, yeah.
if you get if you do those hours, yeah, you'll succeed. If there's one takeaway from this, if you manage to get in the hours, that's gonna.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, the example of that 10,000 hours, my favorite example, of course, is with the Beatles. Beatles seemed to just explode and from nowhere and, be this perfect band in 1963. How did they do it? These kids, they're young and but they had already done the 10,000 hours of gigs in Hamburg, in Liverpool, and they did the work first. And people who have this advanced level of English, they didn't just wake up one morning or they didn't just study for a couple of weeks to get that level. they have been working for years on their English and studying to get there. So,
I'm aware of the Beatles thing because I've read the book by Malcolm Gladwell. He
mhm,
talks about that. Yeah, we always
yeah,
assumed that the Beatles came out of nowhere, but they were working 7 hours a day, 7 days a week. So yeah, they
yeah.
were talented, of course. There are lots of talented people. Yeah, there are lots, a dime a dozen. But what they had that the others didn't is by the age of like 20, 21, they'd done 10,000 hours of working together.
Some people learn or find it easier to learn a language than others. There's a slight difference, but even people who find it more difficult with the effort, they can get to an advanced level. It is possible.
When you speak to someone who's reached a very high level of English, you know the work that they've done. You know they
Mhm,
just have woken up one day, flick through Murphy's Grammar and listen
mhm.
to a few podcasts and go out and, speak like, I don't know, I can't think of an author. J.K. Rowling. Okay. But, yeah, no, it's a lot of work. Somebody told me, was it you maybe, about Picasso. Picasso did a painting in 2 minutes. And then he asked somebody, says, "There's my picture, $10,000 for it." He goes, "What? But 10,000? Are you kidding? That took you 2 minutes." He says, "No, it took me 60 years and 2 minutes to do that."
Yeah, yeah, that was an old, I don't know if that's a true story, but it's apparently an old woman in a market bumped into Picasso and said, "Can you draw me a
Okay.
picture?" And it just quickly drew her a picture and then said, "Yeah, that'll be, I don't know, 100,000 pesetas or whatever it was." And she was very shocked. But yeah, it's all, you
Yeah,
don't,
sorry for you,
Picasso,
actually. Yeah,
well, I don't know, but I've heard, I have told that story, but I've heard it and told it, so maybe it was with you, I
that's
don't
so
remember.
true.
But Picasso wasn't born or didn't just wake up one morning with the ability to draw
No.
amazing pictures, or Leonardo da Vinci, or, a lot of time and effort goes into it.
You have another one?
Yeah, I think I have one more, and it's kind of linked. I guess they're all kind of linked, they overlap, but keep going, be consistent. A lot of people get very enthusiastic about learning English and they really go for it 100% and they decide they're going to study hours every day, and that's fine. That's great if you can keep doing it, or if you're not going to sort of get burnout or lose that momentum and just give up. That's something I see. Some students have these moments. Maybe it's a couple of weeks, maybe it's a few months, maybe even a couple of years where they have a really positive relationship with English, but then suddenly they just stop, they lose it. That's probably happened to everyone. It's happened to me in other areas. I think I've had dozens of hobbies over the years, and I've been really enthusiastic about photography, for example, for a year and a half, and then I just got bored with it and stopped. It was quite intensely learning all the aspects of photography, and then I just lost interest. And that's fine because it's photography, but with English, for all these tips we've given, and as Gideon said, it has to be what works for you. But that in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years, you're still going to be not necessarily studying English intensively, but you're still going to have this relationship with English
Yeah.
where you're going to be doing something with your English consistently. It doesn't have to be every day, but regularly, a long, long period, perhaps the rest of your life.
It helps if you have a reason for using your English. It's not just an academic exercise. I know from my students, obviously the obvious one is you have a partner who speaks English, or grandchildren, the children who moved to America. That's more obvious. But if you can find a reason I want to learn English because I want to understand this series. I want to join this group in my neighbourhood where they talk in English. And if you find a reason where you can use it,
Yeah,
that helps. You have little
that's
objectives.
exactly, that's where exams come in handy. So when people decide to take an exam, it can really give them that extra boost of motivation. The problem with exams is that they are short-term objectives. They're objectives on the road or the journey to your long-term objective, which is to learn English to communicate. But they can give you that little boost to
I
make
should
the
say,
effort.
just as an aside about exams, because many people knock exams. I don't need it sometimes myself. I don't feel like taking exams, but they
Yeah,
help. Or at least in two ways. Firstly, when you're studying for an exam, that in itself is a motivation. And also, by taking an exam, you get feedback of where you get what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and what you can improve on. So, we can say we hate exams, but there is a point to them. You teach
yeah.
exams, I'm sure you agree with that.
Some people are surprised when I say I don't necessarily recommend exams to everybody because yes, I kind of specialize in Cambridge English exam preparation, but I don't necessarily promote exams to everyone. If somebody decides to take an exam, I promote my my videos, my YouTube videos or my online courses to help those people. But I never sell exams to anybody because it's not necessarily the best option. But I have seen with a lot of my students who have decided to take an exam a real improvement in their English level because suddenly a lot of what we've spoken about today, they're paying attention, that their environment is in English now because they have to do these tasks. They're just more proactive in their learning. So exams can really be beneficial. The biggest problem with exams is that, what next? You pass, you get the certificate, then you have to continue. You could take the next level if you wanted to, but that's not really the final objective. You have to be sustainable. So yeah, exams are good for some people, not for everyone, but they can give you that boost that you sometimes need. That plateau sort of at intermediate level. Usually we hit a plateau where we don't feel we're improving. So you need something. You need sometimes an extra boost, and exams can sometimes fulfill that kind of need.
Okay, I agree. I kind of like to talk about this as well because it's linked to what I said before, but it is just simply do the maths and beware. Sort of subtext is beware of red flags. People are watching this video, I hope, because they genuinely want to improve their English and reach fluency, and if that's the case, they're probably getting information from other places. So I want to say do the maths that if you, I don't know if you want to read a book, you need to have a vocabulary of 10,000 words. You need years of study, and there are a lot of red flags, which I'm saying that this is the things that you should avoid when people say something like you can learn English effortlessly. The traditional approach doesn't work, even though I'm not saying we do completely the traditional approach, but people have been learning languages for thousands of years. It's not just something which was invented on the internet by hyper-polyglots in the last 3 years. It's really easy. It is kind of easy if you enjoy it, but it takes years of time. And another one which, I don't know, this really annoys me, I don't know why I say it. People say, well, listen, you don't learn a language, you acquire it. They say it with such solemnity and importance. Well, which is only partly true. You do kind of acquire it, but also you need to learn. You need to sit, at some point you're going to have to sit down and learn lots of stuff in order to improve. So you don't, you don't just acquire it. No, you learn it and acquire it both. A child maybe will acquire it, but even them, they go to school for a reason, and that's to learn stuff. So do the maths. It takes many years. You need to learn thousands of words. You need lots of grammar, etc.
Of course, I agree, and it's at the end of the day, lots of people on YouTube or want to sell books or whatever, they're trying
to sell their thing.
Yeah, they're focusing on marketing rather than what's really better for the student, how to get a click. Often.
You don't need to learn boring grammar on our course because I don't like grammar. That's great. I'll sign up to this one because I don't need to learn boring grammar. The person who say boring grammar is probably a boring person because they can't explain it in an interesting way. Yeah,
it's all necessary. I think you have to say to yourself, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. They're making all these promises. You're going to learn English without studying grammar, or learn English or reach fluency in 3 months. That sounds too good to be true, but it's not true.
Forget the traditional methods; they don't work, Ben. No.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pay for my expensive course, 99% off this week only. The clock is ticking. Sign up now.
Only 10 seconds, and you'll lose this once in a lifetime opportunity to reach fluency in 3 seconds.
You either sign up for my course or you're a loser.
Exactly. Yeah.
Know what it takes. Just be aware of what it involves. Have we already spoken about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay. Do you have another one? You're hesitating.
The reason I'm hesitating is because it's kind of obvious, but it's about vocabulary. I don't underestimate the value of expanding your vocabulary. I mean, and be curious about the vocabulary. I learned a new word in English the other day. Actually, it was a couple of months ago, and I still remember it to this day. I'd be interested in, Gideon, if you know this word. The word is to pronk. Have you ever heard of this word? Pron.
P-R-O-N.
Yeah,
Honestly, no, I don't plonk. I thought B-L.
yeah, to
No,
pronk.
no, I don't. What does
Well,
it
I
mean?
read it in an article, and coincidentally, a couple of weeks later, so I read it in a Guardian article a few months ago, and then I was doing the word game
Yeah.
Wordle, and it was the word, so that kind of reinforced it in my vocabulary. To pronk, it's what springbok and antelope do when they jump. You know, they sort of spring in the air and they jump in a
Ah,
certain way. They pronk. If you see a herd of springbok jumping in the field, they are pronking.
I live in the
The
centre of
reason I say
Paris.
this is
Not many.
not you're not going to use that, but it's stuck in my mind, and it just goes to show. You know, I'm 47. I'm going to say my age. I'm a 47-year-old English teacher, born in England. I'm a native
Widely
English
read.
speaker. I have a what? Yeah, I have a wide range of vocabulary, but I'm still learning new vocabulary every time. Not every time, but often when I read a book, an English language book, there are new words that come up, and it's something positive, I think. So you know, you as an English learner, you know, sometimes it can be intimidating. Think, my word, there are so many new words that I don't know. But just keep little by little expanding your vocabulary, and it just gives you more options when you're speaking and
Yeah.
writing, and you can understand more. So don't underestimate the importance of vocabulary.
I think for you and I, really, it's just, learning new words is such a joy, whether it be in English or in another
Yeah,
language you're learning. It's sort of, wow, I knew when you learn it and then you use it for the first time, and now you've got
yeah.
me thinking, how would I use pronk in a sentence? I'm not sure. You explained
Well,
it very well,
well, I
but
think
oh, look, those antelopes out there on Boulevard Haussmann pronking. It's,
yes, I think you've used it correctly. If you do happen to see a herd of antelopes pronking down the main road in Paris, then you're prepared for how to how to express that. I think this article, I think it was Australia, some antelope crossed a major motorway, I think, and they didn't just say they jumped across; they said they pronked or they were pronking across. Probably never used that word. Anybody watching this
well,
video
now
will probably
you're
know.
wrong.
You
You're
can, you're
wrong
going to use it all
because
the time
every
now.
day I think there's an
You'd probably
ambulance
use it in a.
pronking outside.
They're going to. One of
Um,
the antelopes was run over, so they're going to save it
exactly.
while it's pronking.
Pronking along, and this one, I'm sure you're going to agree with this one. I'd be very surprised if you don't. But even the viewer pronking, wherever he's pronking or she's pronking, will agree with this. But it needs to be said, and that is, I get close to the camera tonight. It's okay to make mistakes. It's cool. It's fine. People aren't going to laugh at you. Ha ha! You use the past perfect continuous incorrectly. Are you stupid or something? No. It's okay. You're learning a language. It's okay to make mistakes. It's expected. Just keep on keeping on. Carry on speaking. Carry on writing. No one is laughing at you.
Of course, yeah, I agree 100%. And it's about the mistakes, but it's also about this fear of humiliation, right? This fear of making a fool of yourself in front of others,
Yeah.
and that's what holds people back. They think, oh, what if I make a mistake? I'm just going to either avoid speaking, or I'm just going to keep it very basic and very simple. Have fun with your English. Make mistakes. I think people are not going to laugh at you. I know that, but also think, would you laugh at someone? You know, if I make mistakes when I speak Spanish, people don't laugh at me. They just, unless sometimes I make very silly mistakes, but we laugh together then. If you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's listening to you, you would realize they're not going to laugh at you. They just want to understand what you're saying. Really, that's the first objective. And you realize you can laugh about it. It's all fun. It's all good. So yeah, of course, that's very important. Yeah, related to the attitude, I think.
I should say that the reason I'm mentioning this also is because I'm guilty of it myself.
Ah,
As
yeah.
constantly teaching grammar when I'm trying to speak, well, it's like the main languages I speak French and Spanish, but I don't like to make a grammatical mistake, especially it's a bit more difficult in French, with the masculine and feminine. I think it's that word language is a bit more clear of the no or an A or any, but in French sometimes it's not evident, and sometimes I won't say the words. I'll try and think of
Yeah,
another word because I don't want to say, I'll just do a
yeah,
plural. I'll just order,
yeah.
instead of one beer, I say deux bières because there's
You miss, you avoid it.
yeah, I don't want to make a mistake, so I'll just end up drinking too much.
Yeah.
So I'm guilty of it myself, so that's why.
Me too. Yeah,
Behind.
I think
You too.
that's why. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's easy to give these tips like we're perfect language learners. We're obviously
Yeah,
not,
exactly.
but that's why we can give these, or one of the reasons, apart from being teachers, we're language learners and we know the experience. And I think I used to obsess more about my mistakes, but I got to a point a few years ago where I just thought I just have to just relax and speak, and it's not going to. It's better for the person you're speaking to because they don't care about your mistakes and they just want a nice, fluent, natural conversation. They don't want to
Yeah.
be waiting for you to formulate the perfect sentence or correct yourself. It's much more a pleasant conversation if you can just relax and
It's
speak.
true also because the person you're speaking to is probably not going to be an English teacher obsessing like we are, obsessing over grammar, listening to every word, every syllable, every tense you're using, as that's one of the hazards of our job profession. But most people they don't care; they don't even notice. You ask, did the
No,
person make a mistake? No, I don't think.
a quick anecdote or something yesterday. I was watching a YouTube video with Luis Enrique, who's the manager of PSG Football Club. He's Spanish, and he was speaking in English. It's the first time I heard him speak in English in an interview. And his English isn't great. He made lots of mistakes. And I thought I'm going to read the YouTube comments because I'm sure a lot of people were saying, "Oh, but he made mistakes. His English is terrible." Zero comments about his English because nobody cared. This wasn't an English learning channel. You know, if this was an English learning channel, there would be people analyzing his English. This was a football channel, and people were only interested in what he was saying. So he has a very strong accent in English. He made grammar mistakes. He used wrong vocabulary sometimes, but what he was saying, not about whether he was making mistakes or not. So that's an example of somebody, a famous person who's confident enough to speak on camera in front of millions of people and make mistakes, and nobody cares. Or, as you said, only English teachers and perhaps English students care. In the real world, nobody cares.
That's absolutely true. I will just add though about football managers making grammar mistakes. You'll often hear it with native English speakers.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
lad done good today. Yeah,
yeah.
maybe it's a little bit more shocking. It's their first language, but
That's
I
true.
get your point. It's just
Yeah. Again, as
if the
English
team
teachers, that's
wins, that's what the fans care about. If the team's
yeah,
winning or not.
exactly.
Well, the team's won 99% of their games, but the manager, his grammar's not very good. We should kick him out.
Yeah, yeah. He needs to use a wider range of vocabulary to
Yeah,
express
yeah,
his ideas. No, they're very
exactly.
good communicators, football managers, without
Yeah.
necessarily speaking the language perfectly. Yeah, whether they're native speakers or not.
My next point here, I'm going to give you. You're talking about your um, hobby of photography, all right? So you know about this. This is I bought this camera. It's one of the first SLR, DSLR cameras I bought quite a number of years ago before I was making YouTube videos. And before that, I had a point and shoot. And with point and shoot, what you do is you point and you shoot, and it's easy. So I thought, well, I think I'll upgrade. I get this digital DSLR. How hard can it be? And then, what's this? Aperture? I don't know. So shutter speed, ISO, white. What's all this? I'm sure I can work it out. So I was going out trying to, and I couldn't work it out. It's just no. And then a friend, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this. Then I went out with a friend who knew about it. I said, well, can you help me? And he just explained it. And in a couple of hours, I got it all, how to, more or less, even the composition, he showed me how to do it. And why I'm talking about this is because I want to tell you, learn the grammar. It's so trendy nowadays to say, well, you don't really need to learn grammar. No, it's all input, and you'll pick it up. Don't learn it. Well, maybe you can, but maybe I could learn how to use a SLR camera without studying it eventually, but it's very, very inefficient. The reason we learn grammar is for efficiency. It speeds up the learning. And you're going to get people saying, don't know. Maybe they have. I don't know. I'm a bit skeptical. I'm sure in the comments, yeah. But if you want to be an efficient grammar learning, study vocabulary, or use the vocabulary, importantly, and study some grammar. You agree?
Yep, of course.
You teach a lot of grammar.
Yeah, I do teach grammar, and yeah, I think your example with the camera is very good. It just yeah, just one person telling you a few of the technical, details and how to use the camera just made such a big difference. Suddenly, you felt more confident. Yeah, Uh, it's like I've given the example before of learning guitar or any instrument. I could just, if I didn't know the instrument, I could just pick it up and probably 30 years later, I would work out all the chords and all the notes, but it would take a long time and a lot of effort. Or I could just study the chords, either with a teacher or with a book, and the notes and the scales in a lot less time, and it would make it a much more, in the end, enjoyable experience because you're progressing more quickly and you're understanding how the instrument works. So yes, the same with photography and of course with grammar. I agree. I think it's too easy just to dismiss grammar. Of course, you need the input, but if you're not if you're not paying attention and sort of studying the grammar, it's going to take you a lot longer to figure out why we use these structures. Just going to have to kind of guess, which will take a long time.
I got another Beatles anecdote related to music. George Harrison was playing the guitar, and then he heard about this chord that he didn't know. I don't know, A7 minor, diminished sixth, whatever it is. I don't know. He didn't know the chord or how to do the fingering of the chord. And so him and another Beatle or two knew an expert guitarist on the other side of town. And so they took a bus, went like an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back, just to learn one chord. And that's a good language learner. George Harrison, wherever you are, you would have been a great linguist. Because that's the attitude you need, yeah?
Yeah, making the effort that's required because that was a special chord, I guess, from a song that nowadays we have the
I
internet, we
don't
can
know
find the
why they
chords.
used it, but yeah.
Maybe it was the famous chord at the beginning of A Hard Day's Night. That they
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that nobody
maybe.
knows what chord they play. It's some mystery chord. So
I don't know. Well, nowadays, of course, you just check on the internet. Oh, yeah, that's what you do. Oh, okay.
yeah,
5 seconds, but this was before.
well, that's another. If you wanted another tip from me, I think it, you remember things when you have to make an effort. If things are too easy, so when you're learning vocabulary, if you just find the translation into your own language, if you're in a hurry, that's fine. If you just need to write a quick email and you need to find the translation of a word, but really you're not going to remember it. To remember it, you have to make an effort. George
Yeah.
Harrison traveled across the city to find the chord, and he never forgot that chord, I'm sure. But you have to learn all the different meanings of a word, see example sentences, write your own example sentences. You're not going to do that for every new word you learn, but if the important words that you think you're going to use in the future, making the effort will really help you remember in the long term.
Okay, that's good. Okay, I've got one more
Mhm.
short one,
Yeah.
maybe just to finish off. I'm going to look into the camera. The internet is your friend and your enemy. Yeah. Well, I think we've already got over, how everyone knows how great a resource the internet is. Yeah, fine, fair enough. But it can also be distracting and upsetting in the sense that everyone else seems to be doing fantastically. Everyone else is great. Everyone else is like speeding through the language learning process so easily, getting to fluency without an accent, sounding like a native speaker. I've never left Paraguay. I'm 22 years old and I sound like, one of the cast of Downton Abbey. Yeah, you see, I can do it. You can do it too. No problem. By my course. But yeah, so it can be disturbing when you see the hyperpolyglots again. Yeah, I can do it. You can do it. It's easy. Yeah, you can do it too. Um, so Yeah, it can be upsetting as well. So things that I don't like out there that discourage you, demotivate.
Discouraging, demoralizing, yeah, all those things. I think it's true. You should only compare yourself to yourself, like to compare your English level to how it was a year ago or 2 years ago. And if you're not improving, then you're doing something wrong. But I'm pretty sure you are improving. Your level, you may not realize it, but yeah, if you start comparing, we tend to compare up, don't we? Compare to people who have more money, have a nicer car, have nicer clothes. I don't know, just more successful. We very rarely compare ourselves to people below us. And neither of those things are very healthy anyway. So just compare yourself to yourself and check that you're progressing and heading in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to end it. I think I have to pronk off. I just sit now. If I find a dictionary soon.
If I told you to pronk off, would you be offended? Go on, pronk off.
It depends on the context.
Sounds offensive.
Okay, well, I hope you found that helpful.
Thank you, Gideon, for having me. It's always a pleasure, never a chore.
Okay, well, we'll catch up again soon. Thank you everybody for watching, and let's hear your comments if we've left anything out. You've got your own tips, and see you next time.
Bye.